Hi folks, it's John here. Haven't uploaded a wee fly for a while, so partly being lazy and all the rest of it. I think everybody's a bit miffed off. Well, so I'm gonna try and upload a few more tonight. Trying a new camera setup here as well. So I'm gonna tie an Irish wet Mayfly. So let's get stuck in this Straddleberg type. So this is actually quite a big hook. Try and get a level for the camera. I'll apologise up front if I hit the camera, because I usually do. So I'm using a grey thread. This is Semperfli pre-waxed. I like the grey for a reason, because I don't want to darken the body down too much, and you'll see why in a minute. So yeah, take the camera. So touch and turns down to the bend. Now optional, you can put in a bit of pearl if you wish. If you do, just a tiny amount. My thread, you might not see it in camera, but it's twisted. So if I'm going to put the pearl out over the thread, I want it to be flat. So just counterwind. You'll see how the thread's gone wide. So wind down just a little tiny bit. You can put a drop of super glue on this, but with all these cameras and stuff, I'm not going to bother. Just watch that hook point. You only need a little bit. Again, with cameras in the way, they're never perfect flies. Tail length, it's good to sort of go off the body length. So if I'm pretty much, if I measure to my finger there, that's about a body and a half. I'm going to stick that out the back. Now I believe on wet maize that this represents the shock of the fly more than the actual tails. Then I come up the body in touch and turns, a couple of really good wraps, and then bend it back. And when I'm cutting these, I'm putting my scissors not square but in line with the shank, and cut that in a tapered line. I'll explain why I'm doing most things as I go. So the reason why I've done that is that, well, I do want to keep this body reasonably thin, but I also want to get taper in it. So for your wire, if you have a rotary vise, turn it around, and you baton this on your far side to the way you normally wind. A couple of turns. This product here is just dental floss. And then we're going to tie those down quite firm, down to where the tail begins, and back up in open turns. Again, I'll apologise if I hit the camera. Now this particular fly would be, and you can perhaps see that the dental floss is sort of like translucent, which is a look I like. Again, you can imagine I'm, with my limited setup, quite a distance away from the fly, so it makes it harder. So I've stopped here for a reason. I believe that a lot of these flies, buzzers, traffic light, whatever one you want to call it, a lot of these flies, they need to be translucent, and there's a bit of blood involved. So here I've got some let's just call it pickerick seals fur. Don't lick your fingers, just a tiny amount. Now I'll explain why I'm putting that on again. This just wee flush of red I think sets the fly off, and it comes from, well, I've got some very old books here and also some flies that I was given years ago, and they all have it, but just a little bit. So the cape, I'm now tying in a body hackle, and this cape's, well, a good cape like this is hard to get, and to me this is dyed the perfect colour. So we're tying in quite a long hackle, and I want long fibres, but I also don't want them to be too soft. So when you're tying in down here, the hackle is slightly thicker, so you maybe noticed that in some of your flies before, the hackle stalk snaps. The way I've found to get round this is to, again, you don't see it too much, but it's in all my old books, to tie your fly in dry fly hackle, which is like figure of eights, and then come forward, bending the stalk forward, so the hackle's coming in and then towards the eye. And I'm putting in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over that little ball of dubbing, and then quickly down the back 3. And you can vary this, of course. So you'll notice that before we tied the wire in on the far side, so as I come round, you'll notice that the tail on my fly does not move. That's because I'm coming around and under it, whereas if you tie the wire in on my side, as you would wrap over, it would bend the tail, so it's best to stay away from the tail. And then we're coming up through the dental floss area, and then coming up through to the eye, and I tie off by holding the silk to the far side and then putting a good kink in the wire, and I like 6 turns or so on my wire because a fish's tooth can pull it out. Okay, and then just rotate that around, it breaks off. This here, you can just snap it against the wire. So although we have a very small flush of red in there, we're going to actually add to that. Now these are just, they're actually just big loose lure hackles in solid red, and just going to introduce that 3 turns or so to hold that in. And I normally just turn these with my fingers, but with the camera, typical. So again, this is all a little bit ham-fisted tonight. Yep, doesn't normally happen. Now I'm just coming round just the once. Again, the old flies that I have, they have this in them, but just a little bit. So that's the body of the fly done. Then I'm going to put, this is going to be a French Partridge Mayfly. So here I've got French Partridge dyed. Try and pick a nice one. So this particular feather, you strip it back here to get the last of the flue off this and then just strip it back a little bit, and that will leave yourself a handle. And then we're going to pull back here. Now again, with all partridge sort of game birds, the feather's quite delicate, so we've formed this little arrow shape, and I'm going to grab onto the tip here. Now I tie this in right at the eye, so see, no space, and then come back to where the highlighting red hackle started. Now again, I would normally just pluck this little V out, but I struggle with this with the camera in the way. So now we've got this. Now if I imagine my threads going this way, if I want to use my rotary vise to keep this nice, I can turn it this way. So I'm actually adding more turns to the fly, not taking off. So I can just keep my stalk at 90 degrees coming back towards the red hackle. This also means that the thicker stalk of the partridge is hidden. So now I've got just the bare stalk. I'm going to bring my thread up through here and come across that stalk 3 times. I know it looks a bit messy, but it'll work. This stalk can be a little bit strong, so I don't normally pluck it out unless I'm feeling brave, but so do that. With a bit of Velcro, stroke these fibres back, but don't touch your thread or it'll pull loose fibres out of it, and then your whip finish will be very untidy. So we're now going to come to the front, and I'm going to unwind my thread again. This means that when I'm trying to cover the little loose ends at the front here, the thread's a little bit wider and you can do it in less turns. So that's that. And then I use this style of whip finish tool. We're not going to get into debate about the best ones, but I suppose you just use what you learnt with. And two reasonable whip finishes is good. And then I put a wee blade in mine to trim it off. So that's the fly done, but again, because we used the dental floss here, I didn't want to darken the underbody of it, so now I've got a grey head. And again, going with this orangey red hint at the front, I just doesn't even have to be a waterproof marker, but I just bleed some orange marker into that, and I just let that dry before, well, usually overnight, before I varnish the fly. Last trick with all these flies is to give them a good grooming. I think it makes the fly sit right, and it also means that some of the dubbing in there that has the wee bits of red in there are getting teased out. So that's the completed wet mayfly. This would be a pickerick colour front hackle on it. The undyed grey looks very good as well, even with the olive behind it. Hope you enjoyed that wee video. Cheers folks, bye.